warmer later in the day, 24 degrees Celsius, the warmest temperature to be recorded today. How hot or cold is it where you are? Good morning. This is Morning Cafe, and by now you know this is the best way to kickstart your day.
Most definitely, and greetings to you and yours. But the country is still in mourning. We have lost 3 people following the Azimio anti-government protests Wednesday. We, as the members of the Fourth Estate, speak in one voice: peace. We call for peace, and that political leaders and all stakeholders involved call for truce, lest we pay. And speaking of paying, later on in the course of the show, we'll be talking about paying tithe, an interesting conversation you definitely don't want to miss.
Well, good morning, or not a very good morning indeed. Today marks 4 months since the start of the anti-government protest, and yet not an amicable solution has been found so far. Today, we look at the day 2 of the Azimio protest, the aftermath of yesterday's protest, and what can be done moving on. Good morning. You're watching Morning Cafe, and I'm Flora Limuki.
My name is Freddy Ndimuli. And
I'm yours truly, Stanley Nyuringita. Remember, you can always talk to us on socials, mine at Nyuringita_.
At Freddy Ndimuli on Twitter.
Ndimuki_F on Twitter.
Okay. Well, let's begin with the top story before we look at the headlines. And anti-government protests enter their second day this week, with more clashes expected between police and protesters in major cities and towns. Several people were shot yesterday, some possibly fatally, as security forces clashed with demonstrators across the country protesting the high cost of living and tax hikes. It was the third round of anti-government demonstrations the opposition called this month. The Azimio coalition maintains the demos will continue. Meanwhile, President William Ruto maintained that there will be no truce that will lead to a handshake with the Azimio side. And that is our top story. We'll keep you updated in the coming hours. Next up, we'll be looking at the day's diary before we take a look at the headlines this morning.
Well, definitely on the day's diary today, we follow up on the story on Azimio protest at day 2. There is also day and primary schools to resume today after being closed indefinitely yesterday, following the protest that started yesterday and had to run Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Also, we follow up on CJ Martha Koome to launch Kiambu e-filing court as they focus on reducing the backlog in court cases. There is also Senate Defense Committee to meet with the Council of Governors to discuss on the Nyumba Kumi initiative for the elderly. Also, the tussle between police and protesters as the protest entered day 2. We also look at the politics surrounding the handshake as President William Ruto maintains a hard stance that there will be no power sharing, but Azimio have to look for a way to forge a way forward to look for a solution for the ongoing protest. Also, we look at Russia strikes Ukraine, Black Sea, and finally, the effects of protest on businesses across the country, even as most parts of the country, businesses remain on standstill following the ongoing Azimio protest.
Yes, let's now take a look at the headlines this morning. And as Stanley had mentioned earlier, the media is speaking with one voice this morning. And a quick look at the Daily Nation, the front page of the Daily Nation and the Standard, a joint commentary by the editors of the media stations. Let's save our country. And this is a front page editorial. It rarely happens, but this time we have one joint one. At the end of the day, we all live in one nation, sailing on the same boat. If it sinks, we will all go down with it. Nobody will be spared. That's the front page of the Daily Nation.
And because definitely we'll take a look at deeply each on every one of them, and also the whole editorial. It reflects on People Daily, which also says, let us save our country, and also Taifa Leo, tuokoe nchi yetu. This is an interesting time that we're living in, even as editors and members of the press, coming together and saying, no, we really need to have one voice, and we really need to save our country.
Mm-hmm.
The Standard here, still the same, let's save our country, joint commentary by editors, of course, of leading media houses. A call for peace. Our democracy accommodates competitive politics, but it need not to be confrontational. At the end of the day, we all live in one nation, sailing on the same boat. If it sinks, we will all go down with it. None will be spared.
Yes, and I think the other paper you said, The People has the same headline this morning.
The People Daily has.
As well as Taifa Leo, the Swahili version of the same.
Yes.
Tahariri ya pamoja kutoka wahariri wa vyombo vya habari Kenya kuhusu ghasia zinazoendelea nchini. Tuokoe nchi yetu. That's a big headline on the front page of the Taifa Leo this morning. Ikumbukwe kwamba sote tunaishi katika taifa moja. Likitumbukia kwenye machafuko, sote tutaangamia. Hakuna atakayenusurika.
Yes, definitely. I believe we can, take a look at, we can start with Daily Nation before we actually, because I also have a couple of, across the borders, international papers.
Yes, I think before we delve deep into this commentary, probably a quick sweep through some of the other headlines. Because I can see even the Star, they did not get to join the other editors in this commentary, but the main headline on the Star this morning, stand still, Raila aides arrested, chaos reign. Businesses paralyzed across the country as police engage protesters on day one of 3-day demos. 5 civilians shot as police arrest ODM leaders. And the number of people who allegedly, or it is claimed that they lost their lives yesterday, keeps shifting. But at least I've seen 2 dailies that have agreed that 5 civilians. I've seen that on the front page of the Standard. 5 dead as police engage protesters. I've seen the same now on the Star, and probably we'll get to see who else has a number of people who may have died from yesterday's chaos.
Right. But then on the Star, just to clarify, it was also in on the editorial, because you can see at the bottom right, it says editors joined commentary. Let's save our country. It is there.
Okay.
That was not left behind.
Okay, definitely. Yes. Quick look at the other headlines. I have the Business Daily this morning. U.S. guarded on Kenya trade deal past AGOA 2025 expiry. Delegation actually met the president yesterday at State House, Nairobi. There's a pact to shield Kenya if America fails to renew AGOA. The envoy says in renewal of the U.S. Congress, 79.9 billion shillings, the value of Kenyan exports to the U.S. last year. That's the front page of the Business Daily today.
Perhaps we look at what is happening beyond the borders.
Yes, definitely. For you actually, delve deep into this one.
Okay.
Now, what's happening in Uganda?
In Uganda, on the Daily Monitor, you have one party, divided people. Here, political blues heavyweights of what was once Uganda's biggest opposition party yesterday narrated to the media the genesis of their fights, mostly fueled by mistrust on the source of campaign funds and political strategy, with citing leadership calling for disciplinary action against colleagues. This is the Daily Monitor, Uganda.
Before Flora, actually, before you continue, I feel like it's Jubilee ghosts roaming around
East Africa.
It happens everywhere. Political parties in this region of the world, they all behave the same. Across the border in Tanzania, we look at the Mwananchi. Agizo la polisi la zua maswali ni la kuwataka wanasiasa mawakili kufika kwenye ofisi za upelelezi kwa madai ya uchochezi. DCI Kingaya zungumza na Mwananchi, asema ni utekelezaji wa agizo la waziri Masauni na Penae Awaka. You see, things happening across the border more or less mirror what's happening here as well. Yesterday, the Tanzanian president made a very curious comment that got Kenyans talking. And she said that Tanzania is currently enjoying a lot of investment, which is a direct result of what is happening in Kenya. And this is what she said: kwa jirani kuna waka moto. Ndio maana wawekezaji wanakuja Tanzania. So geopolitics and what works for who when when there's a problem elsewhere.
And also on the Citizen, the headline there is how Tanzania can avoid hefty claims. So it says, a day after the government confirmed it will appeal against the order to pay an aggrieved Australian firm nearly $110 million, analysts called for the engagement of investors who were affected by the previous administration's harsh policies. That story is extensive on page 2. Now, there's also the whole privatization of key African ports gathers pace with the Durban Pact. And they're also quoting what is happening in Kenya.
Yes.
Police protesters clash in Fresh Kenya demos.
So the demos definitely have made it to the front pages of the dailies in Tanzania. Something else that's interesting, and is not happening in Kenya, but is happening in Tanzania, has to do with the ex-president, retired President Jakaya Kikwete, and he says he is proud of Samia as head of state. It's definitely not happening in Kenya.
At least of what we know.
I can also see here habari leo, and a little bit of some Swahili here. Chongolo Kitila umi watoa somo. It says nape, Watanzania wanastahili huduma bora mawasiliano. Interesting. I love the, just on a lighter note, love how Swahili headlines really give the whole, touch of what you're trying to really say.
Okay.
Fred.
Let's now come back home and take a deeper look at the dailies this morning. And of course, with a joint commentary plus a detailed review of what happened yesterday with the Mandamano, the third wave of Azimio protests. I'm looking at the front page of the Standard now. The third wave of Azimio protests, 5 dead. Police engage in protesters in day-long running battles. Raila's allies and aides among scores of demonstrators arrested. Police say hundreds have been arrested. Schools and businesses were paralyzed yesterday, but as we mentioned in the highlights, yesterday the Ministry of Interior and that of Education issued a statement directing all-day schools in Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu that had suspended their learning yesterday to resume starting this morning. So we do expect a return to normalcy in as far as learning is concerned in schools across those 3 counties. Raila Azimio top brass, a no-show yesterday, and of course one of the top trends.
Yes, interesting.
On Twitter today, guys are asking, where's Raila?
Where's Raila?
Where's Raila? I think he sent out a tweet yesterday, and his daughter Winnie also said that they had a disagreement over gym in the afternoon. But yesterday, Raila was a no-show. He has not been seen. Of course, previously we've seen him week after week leading the demonstrations from the front line. Yesterday, he was nowhere. Catholic bishops want Finance Act shelved, and this is probably one of the most interesting things. Catholic bishops issued a joint statement yesterday asking the president to shelve the Finance Act and to actually review other ways of approaching the same towards the same kind of end that they were seeking. Meanwhile, Rift Valley, Mount Kenya, Northern Kenya, and parts of Western were largely calm yesterday. That's the front page of the Standard in as far as the top story is concerned today. Probably let's look at the Nation in as far as the top story is concerned.
On the Nation, we have, of course, the joint commentary on saving the country and all that is going on right now. No to handshake. President Ruto says he's ready for talks on issues affecting Kenyans, but not on power sharing. Azimio chiefs keep off protest. Raila, Karua, and Kalonzo were missing in action, but issued statements. Quite interesting because most of their supporters would feel that they need their leaders even when they're championing for whatever it is that they want to pass to the government. Also, bishops' prayers engage in dialogue. Catholic clergy urge rival camps. That is on page 8 of the Daily Nation. Death, injuries, and arrest. Protesters shot dead and others injured as cause put behind bars. That is on page 4, 5, and 7 of the Daily Nation. Pretty much of the magazines today is on the protest yesterday.
I feel that probably one thing that has not, of course, probably it's been overtaken by the joint commentary, but the fact that police are said to have used a lot of force or excessive force yesterday, probably that is what I expected to see on the front pages. Of course, the joint commentary is definitely justified, but the fact that people lost their lives, 5, according to the Standard this morning, also the Star, 5 people losing their lives as a direct result of gunshots from law enforcement. That is a huge thing. And probably that is one of the things that I was hoping would make it directly onto the front pages. You look at some of the pictures inside the dailies. You were looking at the Nation, and if we could just see some of the pictures. And they're very gory pictures. The second and third page of the Daily Nation this morning, there's even an image of someone whose leg has been broken, and it's one of the most gory. It's rare to see such kind of an image in a newspaper. The image on page 3 of someone's leg that appears injured extensively, and he said he was caught up in running battles between police and demonstrators in Mathare number 10 area yesterday.
And also on page 2, even the police officer holding 2 guns there. So a police officer runs away from a group of opposition supporters during the anti-government protests in Nairobi. Interesting, by the way, I met whoever took this photo, a great friend of mine. He was explaining to me how everything was happening during this particular time. So, the police officer was, loading the gun. Is it called a pistol or, the black one, the small one?
Yeah, pistol.
The pistol. So, trying to shoot at the protesters, but then now there was if you can see on his, is it his left? On his left, there's a turn there. So there's a number of rowdy youth who were coming towards him, actually pelted him stones. So you can, if you really notice on his lips, on his upper lip, it's a little red. He was pelted stone there. It really speaks largely on how the next 2 days are really going to be. If this is what we're seeing on what Azimio really saying, the third wave of the Azimio demonstrations, and this is day 1. And just to also digress, if you're taking a look at the press statement that Azimio had, for me, it was worrying. The fact that they started with, the third wave was successful, but then you really come to see later on, in later paragraphs, I think the second or third, that there were lives lost. So I believe they could have really started with, the bigger issue there.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest concern is the fact that, because even police are Kenyans, they are human.
Yes.
And some of the protesters have been aggressive towards the police service, have been aggressive towards the police officers, throwing stones at them, definitely not taking it seriously. They are not just looking to chase them away. Some of them are actually intent on causing injuries, grievous bodily harm on the police officers. And of course, the police have a right to defend themselves, protect themselves, in as much as they are there to protect the lives and property of Kenyans. But it is a very thin line, public enforcement and the use of excessive force, especially when trying to contain civil unrest. But then again, who bears the greatest responsibility here? Is it the protesters or the police?
Actually, before sorry to cut you short, before you actually continue, still on page 3, this is a very interesting, and this, even as members of the press, we were really shocked by this. On page 3, the last photo that you can see there, a security officer arrests a demonstrator in Mathare's number 10 area. Fleur, do you remember this this video yesterday? So this police officer was masquerading as a journalist.
Exactly.
And he was there among the journalists, and then boom, he came and arrested the demonstrator. And even the media council had to release a statement and say, no, this is wrong, this is unprofessional.
It puts the journalists at risk now, because they'll be regarded as also a threat to the demonstrators.
Then in an era of using phones to pass the message to people, now you can't even be justified to use, because people think you are masquerading as a police officer. Of course, even this image of this police officer here reminds me of something that has been going on in the last few protests, few days. You see this police officer here, yesterday, the Nakuru East Member of Parliament, that is Arama, is seen somewhere holding a pistol in the middle of the protest. Yes, I understand. You'll argue that he wants to protect the businesses of the people. But what happens if these, probably what, you want to protect the businesses, but this gunshot goes to an innocent Kenyan. So I think there ought to be also a kind of gun regulation as even we have these protests, because it's the same thing that we saw with the Nimrod Mbai, it's the Kitui East Member of Parliament.
Kitui East Member of
Yes,
Parliament,
as it was caught up in a fiasco with the KPLC member. So I think also our leaders are kind of taking advantage of the situation. Yeah, in as far as you have the license to own a gun, I think you ought to know also at what instances to show up with it, not just anyhowly.
I have a question because in recent weeks we've also seen protests, especially in France, they were much publicized and they were quite violent, I might add. Yet there were no reports of any deaths as a direct result of the protest. In Kenya, you see that people are ready and willing to take life. Yes. Both the protesters and the police, even politicians, once they unleash their weapons, they are ready to use them to actually take life. And that is a great concern. It is a huge concern. I don't know.
Not in France only. Was it last week? I remember even writing this story in Israel. You know, there was the whole issue of, I think, a whole constitutional, matter, and thousands of, protesters were on the street, and the police were just there to enforce so that they really, they were just there, they were on the streets. But then there were no reports of, people injured, and it was so, somewhat of a peaceful, protest, as much as the whole, water cannons being sprayed on the protesters, but then
peaceful protest.
At the end of the day, it was
in
peaceful.
South Africa.
I don't know. Maybe it's a culture. Do we have a culture of this?
As I asked earlier, who bears a greater responsibility? Is it the protester or the police service, someone who's actually employed and trained on how to handle unrest? Meanwhile, as all this happened, on the page 6 and 7 of the Daily Nation, the Interior CS, Kithure Kindiki, said 300 people had been arrested on the first day of Azimio demos. But what caught my eye is this two stories, one on the front, on page 6. I'm ready to talk on issues affecting Kenyans, not power sharing, the president maintaining his stance. And on page 7, Raila terms protests a success. Now, if you juxtapose these two stories.
Just thumping.
Just thumping, standing their ground. And it appears that even if we were to look for a solution, it is definitely not coming from these two sides. Yeah. Not from the president and his team, neither is it coming from Raila Odinga and his Azimio team. So where does that leave Kenyans?
Yeah, and what it looks to me here, it's not about the people. This is a battle between two personalities. Yeah, even as much as the Azimio leaders claim that they are fighting for the grievances of the people, at the end of the day, if you can't come to the table and agree on something because you are championing for these supporters of yours, I think it now negates everything that you are fighting for.
Yes, and I think it's this kind of stances that have pushed the media houses and the editorial teams to actually come with this joint statement by the editors. And if I could just go through the first two paragraphs back to the main editorial by the media houses. It's both on the Daily Nation, on the Standard, on the People Daily, and the Star. So you could actually access it from any of those 4 daily papers. This nation stands on the precipice. Unless reason prevails, we could all very well tumble down into a dark and dangerous abyss from which it could be almost impossible to extricate ourselves. We take pride in Kenya since independence 60 years ago, being hailed as an island of peace in turbulent seas, but it is delusional to imagine that we can never descend into the chaos, anarchy, and civil strife that have afflicted many countries in the wider Eastern African region. Media houses just trying to paint a picture of what could happen to us, just the kind of risk that we are joking around with if this continues. Remember, yesterday was only day 1 of a 3-day protest this week. Kenya has only been at work for 2 days this week.
And speak of days and time, I appreciate the fact that the editorial also takes us back to back then, it mentions the 2007, 2008 violence. It really takes us back to the 1997 and, until 1990, 1991. Days I wasn't even born. Back to this.
You were not born in 1991. Wow.
Sorry for another day.
But then, it really takes us back, because these are these are pictures that are in our history books. I'm pretty sure back then in the Muli was, I don't know, in maybe high school or back then, or maybe even in college, you're really there and you really experience this. But then a huge number of us, even in the country, were there at that time. And we did see this. And it's, the fact that the editorial takes us back and we experienced this, but we shouldn't really go through the same.
Yes. Probably the other thing that we should give prominence to is this call by the Catholic bishops. Yes, yeah. On page 5 of the Standard, it's the Standard. Catholic bishops want Finance Act repealed. I do not know how possible that is. This thing passed through Parliament. The President signed it into law. It's only been suspended temporarily because of the processes in court. But now the Catholic bishops say, no, just repeal it, go back, relook at clerics actually saying the president should listen to Kenyans' cries. Yet the government insists that the protests are not about Kenyans crying about the cost of living. This is something that has to do with politics and not the cost of living. Do you really think this call by the Catholics could...
I think it's a little bit late for this. This should have come maybe in earlier stages before the finance bill was sent to law, because at the moment it's in the courts, and from what we've been, the trajectory that we've been seeing from court decisions since this government came in, pretty much any Kenyan could maybe know the possible outcome of this. But I think you can only wait and see if there stands a chance for the Finance Act actually to come down. What can be done is just the delay of the ruling, but I don't think much can change so as to...
It is a fair call for sobriety, but the practicality of the same.
But then if you ask me, this is a litmus test for the independence of the judiciary, this being, about 9 months or so in the government of President William Ruto. It's a litmus test because right now, as I understand, the Supreme Court and Chief Justice has appointed 3-judge bench to discuss this and have the final say on this matter. So it is going to be an interesting bit. I believe even the Kenya Kwanza administration was perturbed, if I can use that word, on what the High Court really said. The fact that it delayed the whole suspension of it and took this particular matter all the way to the Apex Court. So it is going to be a litmus test for me and how this matter is going to be solved. If they're going to really be the issues that they will raise, if they're going to raise it in sobriety and say this is why, because I mean the 3-judge bench, it is a 3-judge bench, so maybe all of them decide on the same. Maybe 2 of them decide differently and 1 decides differently. But then at the end of the day, because this has been a very controversial matter for months now, so at the end of the day, even the issues that they will be raising, they really have to be in a sober way, I believe.
Yes. We're just about to go on a break. When we come back, we're hoping to have the Member of Parliament, Gatundu South, Gigi Kagombe, and an analyst, Daniel Orogo, as we take a look at this commentary, the call by the Catholic bishops for sobriety, and also the behavior of the police service and officers in containing the demonstrators yesterday. The fact that at the end of the day, a number of people may have lost their lives as a direct result of gunshot wounds from the guns of people meant to protect the same lives. You're watching Morning Cafe. Let's take a break. Flora and Stanley, and we continue looking at the dailies this morning, the big headlines and the headlines inside the dailies, and there's one interesting one. Stanley is keen to look at the cartoons. Stanley.
All right, well, Flora, will you take a look at the whole courier before we get into the lighter bit and critic, both cartoons for Daily and Standard?
Standard, absolutely. On top U.S. trade official snaps courier again. That is on page 8 of the Standard. We see here, and the Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs, Alfred Mutua, issued a press statement yesterday concerning the same. You are wrong, Mutua tells UN Human Rights Office. Foreign Affairs Cabinet Secretary Alfred Mutua faulted the United Nations Human Rights Office of allegations that last week's demonstrations were violent. Am I reading the same thing?
Well, okay,
Still on the same page.
Still on the same page now. Stayed silent on Courier's exclusion from US.
Oh, okay. That's okay. Got it. The U.S. Trade Representative was in the country to discuss partnership deals. Let me read the U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai confirmed that she has not met Trade and Investment Cabinet Secretary Moses Kuria during a trip to the country. Tai yesterday met President William Ruto at the State House, and CS was not part of the official in the talks. Remember, CS Kuria has been quite vocal in the last few days concerning the protest, and many Kenyans remain worried about some of his tweets that he makes randomly. Many would ask if he still owns the account or runs the account or whoever runs it. But I think it was time Kenyans would ask, don't they see this is the CS trade that we expect to be at the forefront of championing for Kenya's trade relations between different countries. But then what you see on social media is a contrary of what it portrays the Ministry of Trade as. So I think it is also a clarion call for leaders, even as much as there is a freedom of expression and speech, to also consider how we are viewed by our potential partners in terms of trade and even politics and the international community as well.
It reminds me of what Miguna was telling CS. I think it was maybe yesterday or the day before, on his Twitter, telling him, remember, you are a cabinet secretary of the whole country and not just, a particular region. The fact that he had tweeted in the Agikuyu language. But then, speaking of which, by the way, now on the Daily Nation, still on the same, tweet of the cabinet secretary of, Treasury, rather not Treasury, but Trade, on page 13 of, Daily Nation. It's interesting here how we have there's a table, there are two flags there. There's the flag of the United States of America, and there is the flag of Kenya. I can't really tell who's sitting on the lap of...
Well, I can tell you, and I'm not going to mince my words, this is where a guest comes, you have a visitor who comes to visit your home, and the errant child is actually hidden away from the visitor. This one who behaves badly is hidden away. But you go outside until Mugeni atoke.
And then and then, definitely, so there's,
The good child is the one being carried. Now, that's where I'm not so sure who the good child is on the laps of the parent. But the errant one is definitely trying to be pacified and kept quiet.
Relax.
Yes. not to embarrass the family.
It's a bottle, the milk thing. Yeah.
The pacifier.
Yes. Please have your milk by the time we are done with the visitors.
I think it's actually a very appropriate cartoon because, yes, why was he missing in action? The trade representative from a country no less than the United States comes there, and the minister in charge of trade and investment is not invited to the table. That is quite a story.
Most definitely. And, it really speaks because at the end of the day, we will have really gained a lot, if you ask me, from all these particular trade talks. But then we're still on critic. I definitely want to know which between Daily Nation and Standard wins for you today. Now, on the Standard, on page 14, it's quite interesting, if you ask me. The two gentlemen there, pointing fingers at each other. One with is it called a Durban or what? And the other with a government, I'd say, resembles what Azimio leader Raila Odinga normally dresses. Correct me if I'm wrong. Well, on the other side, down there, they're in a balcony down there. There is, you can see fire, there's smoke.
Yes.
There are soldiers, chasing people with guns. The people lying down there.
Well, it just paints a picture of the kind of life we live in today. The fact that these two leaders are perched somewhere on a balcony, enjoying some luxuries while being protected by security forces, pointing fingers at each other, while the people out there who are not enjoying the same kind of luxury or protection from the police are killing each other, and some are being killed, shot directly by police, not being protected. Those who are being protected and who are to blame for these chaos are just pointing fingers and enjoying protection from the police. Yeah. And that is a sad state of affairs.
It is, actually. I think it's time Kenyans should just wake up and smell the coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Even as much as these people are arguing here, it seems like a very peaceful argument. At the end of the day, they're just, they'll find an amicable solution at the end of the day, but Kenyans somewhere are, we're losing lives every day, day in, day out.
I'm glad you mentioned coffee. The thing about coffee is if you smell it, it will wake you up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which one? Let me start with the floor. Which one wins for you between the standard? Taking a look at both cartoons.
The standard one wins for me.
Why?
Because it shows, in as much as these people are fighting in a very prestigious place, we Kenyans, it's okay to protest, because many people say constitutionally it's okay to protest, to picket, but can it be peaceful? We saw what happened in South Africa, led by Malema. Thousands of people walking to the streets, but in a very peaceful way. Let's have the same, and also have a common goal of what we are fighting for. Yeah? And I think that way we are able to achieve, the president may be able to listen to what the people are saying. Right. But then if you protest and cause blood, of course, that goes on the head of state's hands and his regime. So of course, as a human being, and a human being who has emotions, you may definitely be forced to act even when you don't want to.
Right. Fred?
Of course, I too would go with the cartoon on the Standard today. I'm not saying the one on the Daily Nation is not a good one. It is a good one. But the one on the Standard has actually captured the mood of the country, the thoughts that we are thinking. Because we do agree that this is a situation we are facing currently in Kenya. Yes, the other one paints a picture of this errant CS who has actually been left out of very serious talks to his own embarrassment. But there are bigger discussions in Kenya today, and that has been captured by the cartoon on the Standard. Yes.
I think I'll also stamp the same. I'd also go with the Standard, which again raises our big question, even from the big story, who bears the biggest and the bigger brand? Is it the police or the protesters? When it comes to the anti-government protests, even on the Standard, really showing and depicting the mood in the country. The police officers here with guns shooting directly at protesters, or, okay, for this, we can't really tell if they were protesting, but then they're shooting at unharmed, rather, people and civilians. So
let's get that question right. Who bears the greater responsibility between police and the protesters? Yes? Who bears the greater responsibility between the police and the protesters? And shortly, even as you continue sharing your feedback on all the social media pages.
Hashtag Morning Cafe, our SMS line 22047 at Limuki_F, at Fred Indimuli at Nyaringita_ on Twitter, and the hashtag is Morning Cafe. Yes, and shortly we'll be welcoming onto the set the Honorable Gigi Kagombe, the MP for Gatundu South, and also Dan Orogo, a governance expert, to discuss what's happening. To help us look at the big headlines this morning, the main discussion about the use of police in containing the protests, the joint commentary by the editors,
asking Kenyans to save their own country. And they're saying that at the end of the day, we all live in one nation, sailing on the same boat. If it sinks, we will all go down with it. Nobody will be spared. And that is the main headline. And I think it is something that we can keep beaming on the screens, because this is a joint commentary by all the media houses. And as I said, you can access this commentary on the Standard as well, the People Daily, the Star newspaper, and the Daily is also giving us an account of what happened yesterday, the third wave of Azimio protests that continue this morning. 5 dead as police engage protesters in day-long running battles. Raila's allies and aides among scores of demonstrators arrested. Schools and businesses paralyzed as people and students stay at home. An update to that, the Ministry of Interior and that of Education issued another joint statement yesterday evening directing schools in Mombasa, Nairobi and Kisumu that had suspended their learning to return this morning. So we do expect a return to normalcy, at least for all learners in those 3 counties. Meanwhile, the Catholic bishops want the Finance Act shelved. And this is one question I'm sure Gigi Kagombe will want to answer the bishops directly this morning. We'll give him that opportunity. Meanwhile, on the front page of the Daily Nation, a different account, no handshake. President Ruto says he's ready for talks on issues affecting Kenyans, but not on power sharing. Azimio chiefs keep off protests. Raila, Karua and Kalonzo were missing in action, but issued statements later. Also a mention of what the Catholic bishops want the president to do. Yes, you're still watching Morning Cafe right here on TV 47, and this morning I'm privileged to have 2 gentlemen on set. We want to look at a lot of what is happening. Just a moment, I need to confirm something here. Remember, our top story today has to do with the protests. The government has asked schools to reopen in Mombasa, Nairobi and Kisumu, meaning that they've reassessed the security situation, and they now say that the learners are safe to return. Now, as I promised, Honorable Gigi Kagombe MP Gatundu South is in studio. Mheshimiwa, karibu sana. Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Yes. We also do have Daniel Orogo, governance expert. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Fred.
Hesbon Owila sent his apologies. We'd also invited Hesbon, but he says that the security situation currently prevailing has made him unable to reach our studios, but of course we'll host him another time. Gentlemen, you've seen the headlines this morning, and the Honorable Kagombe, I know you've been a journalist. You're still a journalist. Once a journalist.
Always a journalist.
Always a journalist. Yep. And probably a quick fill of this commentary. Let's save our country. I know that you have been quite critical of the media in recent times. But what do you make of this joint commentary that is, we are seeing at least on the front pages of all the major dailies? That's Daily Nation, The Standard, People Daily, and The Star.
I see, you know, let's save our country. And I have not looked at the content, but I'll say that this really is what we should be doing. We should not be drumming or beating drums of war, and we should be calling people to come back to their senses and to normalcy. Because, and I'm happy, I must say I'm happy this morning, because as I drove into the studio, I realized some semblance of normalcy in the streets. Unlike yesterday, where the roads were clear, I was alone on the road, and I want to say that this country is ours, all of us. And no one is safe if we have chaos. When Hesbon says that he's unable to come to the studio, those are liberties that we're supposed to enjoy, and those are liberties that have been guaranteed, and you should be able to come to work. There shouldn't be any situation, any day in this country where you're unable to go to work, whether it is the weather, whether it is politicians, whether it is, whatever it is. We're just coming away from a pandemic. that again put us in our houses. The feel is just awful. We have an aftertaste of being locked in our houses. And it wasn't good because it wasn't good for the economy. And there was nothing much we could do about it because it was a pandemic. It was not caused by anybody, or if it was, then we don't know. I mean, we were in very bad situation. So for anybody to come and beat drums of war and say that for 3 days we shall not do anything. And you know, unfortunately, this situation, this anarchy, doesn't choose between an Azimio supporter and a non-Azimio supporter. It affects all of us. When an economy loses, the economy is lost to all of us. So I look at the newspaper and I say, this is the way to go.
Daniel, your take on the joint commentary by the media?
Good morning, Fred.
Good morning.
And good morning, viewers. I think being the first time on this studio, is probably on the other side,
studio,
on the other side,
TV47.
you've been through on the other side.
Upi wa kipekee.
And I think it's important to congratulate Cape Media and all the people who made this possible. I mean, it's good to be in this state of the art and quite fancy for viewers who might not have the benefit of sitting
Can
here.
you paint for them the picture of what you're seeing?
Get it from us that it looks a really nice auditorium and very state of the art cameras and everything is at HD at a good level. So to begin is just to congratulate you and the studio for the work that is well done. Today, I have been with Honorable Gakombe on different platforms. We have agreed and disagreed on so many things. And I agree with him on the headlines, a joint editorial. But Fred, I think it comes to a point when people recognize that the country can slide into anarchy at any time. And that no one is spared of the strife when the violence hits. And so the headlines, you can see the account of why we need to save the country. You can see they are reporting that 5 already dead. There's a report that some 8 missing schools and businesses are closing. You can see that there is a little bit of a spurt of violence in different border areas in this country. And so I think that the responsibility is for us to notice that one, we have one Kenya and one nation, that there is no any other spare nation that we have. And secondly, the recognition that the country is still having a scar from the previous post-electoral violence that we've seen. And it's not so far, and I've seen a number of headlines and a number of talking points making headlines on the social media, that one, they're even equating that countries like Rwanda did not see the violence coming.
You never see it coming?
It was normal, and then all of a sudden there is boom. Actually, even for 2007, 2008, no one saw that coming. The sporadic, the spontaneous bit of it made people realize that we were sliding into anarchy. And I need to agree with the Honorable that I think it bequeaths those of us who are having leadership positions in various capacities that we engage into a constructive dialogue. As to what kind of dialogue that is needed, I think that is a conversation for today or another day. But the country agrees that we need to cease fire and have a constructive conversation about the future of this country.
And you've mentioned something very crucial, Daniel, the fact that there appears to be a gap in leadership towards dialogue, towards resolving this, towards bipartisan approach to the problems we have. Gigi, you are a politician. You are the leaders that people in Gatundu South and elsewhere in this country elected to serve the country in the National Assembly. Yet it appears that actually the biggest problem is coming from the leadership, from you people. Do you agree?
First of all, I agree with you 100%. I'm looking at the dailies today, I'm looking at the Daily Nation, and they say on page 7 that Azimio chiefs keep off protests. Yesterday, there was some incidents in Embakasi East. The member of parliament for that place, Babu Owino, was no-show. Raila Odinga was no-show. Martha Karua was no-show. Kalonzo was no-show. Sifuna was no-show. There was nobody. They just called Mandamano, and then they kept calling media houses from undisclosed locations. So they're in safety, and they're sending troops to go and face the police. Yeah? So what we are seeing is people who know. And it's very sad because I need people to understand this. that this whole Maandamano thing is just for one person. It is for Raila Odinga as the leadership of the Azimio. It is for him to have a piece of the government. It was for him in 1982 when he led the coup. It was about him and the soldiers, and 200 civilians died. On Saturday, I'll be meeting the widows of all the soldiers who are now left of 1982 in my office. There are about 24 who have confirmed. And I'll be asking them to give me a story of their lives. I mean, lives were lost long before I was born. Life was lost in 1997 when Raila Odinga vied. Lives were lost in 2007 when Raila Odinga vied again. When he did not vie in 1992, lives are not lost. When he did not vie in 2002, lives are not lost. Lives are lost in 2007 in a big way in this country because Raila Odinga vied. Lives are lost in 2012 when he again vied and lost. Lives were lost in 2017 when he vied and lost. Lives have been lost in 2022 when he vied and lost.
Gigi, you give us a very good chronology of events, but the issue is,
yes.
there's a government in place.
I want to say this. In 1982, there was a government in place. It was not Raila Odinga's government, and I was not even born, I've just told you. Mm-hmm. In 1997, it was Moi's government. In 2007, it was Kibaki's government. In 2012, it was Uhuru's government. In 2017, it was Uhuru's government. In 2023, it is Ruto's government. There's only one constant.
Mm-hmm. Kenyans.
Raila Odinga. There's only one constant in all the. Let me finish.
Which I keep.
And you know, it's very easy. Let me tell you first of all.
Let him finish, and I'll give you a chance, Daniel, to respond to you. So let him execute it.
Let me first of all tell you, Fred, it's very easy to be with Daniel in the studio because you don't have to think. He just takes a position and you automatically take the opposite and you know you're right. Let me finish. And you know you're right. So what he's saying and what he's just about to say, you know, I just need to take the opposite position and I know I'm right. And Kenyans will...
Well, we did this.
And you'll see it here because he said we've been on many platforms together.
There are different positions.
Let me say this. Let me say this, Fred. What I am saying, you asked about leadership, and it is true. Because if this country goes down, is because the people who've been calling for war are leaders. But the people who go to war are not leaders. And I've just told you that they were all missing in action yesterday. The people who faced the wrath of the law and the police were innocent young Kenyans. The people who have the mantle, the people who have the platform to call for Maandamano were in the comfort of their homes or wherever it is that they were. They did not face the tear gas, they did not face the police, they did not face any bullets if there were. They did not face any of that. And you know, by the way, when you tell people to go to the streets, and I was thinking about it in the morning, the night before yesterday, the day before yesterday at night, my own car was stoned. Coming with my cousin, coming from Isli, just as they approached Kariako, there was chaos, and someone pelted a stone and broke the glass of my car. Then I asked myself, I was just chilling. You don't know whose car that is. You don't know anybody. I mean, it could have just been any other...
Do you blame it on the demonstrators, as you say? That was a day before the demonstration.
Yes, because
can you respond to the Honorable Kagombe before we go on the break?
If you saw the videos that were coming yesterday, people said that because the police are going to be coming in the morning that we start Maandamano.
Okay. Let's allow Daniel to respond to you just before we go on a break, and we'll come back to challenge that chronology of events that you've just given us.
Yeah, exactly. Which he understands that I always disagree with his position on some of his views on the current situation that we're having in this country.
But you know,
you know, you're subjective to your view, and you're subjective to your truth. Okay. The issue that we really need to understand, Fred, is. And I said in the last time, looking at the chronological of demonstration and the current protests that are going on, and I said this, when we looked at Sabasaba, it was not only Azimio demonstrators that were on the street. And I kept on saying that we saw the former Chief Justice Emeritus that the tear gas canisters were thrown here at him at Central Police Station. A number of civil society, their rights were violated towards when they were having a peaceful demonstration. Something that we still grapple to understand, that every time there is a protest and this demonstration, we personalize that demonstration. Very unfortunate. So every time we mention about, and I have a problem, by the way, when we call this kind of protest anti-government protest. Because the moment you label it anti-government protest, then the question is, but who is protesting against government? And by default, you lampoon that to the opposition. I would have rather put this thing as a citizen-driven process towards, holding the government to account through expressing their freedom of expression. To that, then we are broad-based parties that are interested in making the government accountable. Now, when you're asking about, and I've seen this perpetuated chronologically of demonstration and personalizing demonstration and opposition. Fred, this is one way that if, certain political functions begin to personalize, then we can go a long way in personalizing who was in the government and the profiles of the people. At those particular points Mheshimiwa has mentioned. You understand? If that is the way to go, people can go in a full length to discuss who was in 1992.
And it's the same problem. We keep going round and round in circles without dealing with the problem.
We will go into cycles and personalize demonstration and not find an answer.
Okay.
So I would ask that probably we might think of a citizen-driven process as opposed to personalizing. Then if we go that direction, we're going to personalize and profile even the people in their government, what they believed in a certain points of time in this history, what their track record has been in terms of constitutionalism, and what their track has been in terms of one multi-party democracy. So if we go that direction, then I think we lose the conversation as to why we should be helping a country
there,
to
Daniel Orogo. We need to go for a break. When we come back, we'll continue with this. And of course, we will challenge even the positions that each one of you holds separately, because we do agree it's a lack of leadership. That's why we even have a joint commentary by the media, because we see when we look at our leaders, we're seeing no end to this situation. You're watching Morning Cafe right here on TV47. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue with Gigi Kagombe, the Honorable Member of Parliament from Gatundu South, and governance expert Daniel Orogo. Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Cafe on TV47. A look at our top story today. Anti-government protests enter their second day this week, with more clashes expected between police and demonstrators in major towns and cities. Several people were shot yesterday, some possibly fatally. Some dailies put the number at 5, as security forces clashed with demonstrators across the country who are protesting against high cost of living and tax hikes. It was the third round of anti-government demonstrations that the opposition called this month. The Azimio coalition maintains that demos will continue Meanwhile, the president maintains that there will be no truce that will lead to a handshake with the Azimio side. Before we continue with the protests, with the discussions in studio, a reminder of our big question: who bears the greatest responsibility between police and the demonstrators? Who bears the greatest responsibility between the police and the demonstrator? Let's now go to Flora for more before we continue with the discussion right here.
Well, of course, looking at some of the trends on our social media, we have Mandamano Wednesday to Friday. That is concerning the protests that have been going on since yesterday, and they continue today. They enter day 2 as Azimio maintains the protests have to go on, and on the other hand, President William Ruto maintains his hard stance that there will be no power sharing unless we look for a better solution to solve the protests. Also, CS Moses Kuria, this is concerning the specific meeting that he missed at the State House following his tweets. And we also have, where is Raila? This is concerning his conspicuous missing in the protest yesterday as they continued. And this has got many Kenyans on socials wondering where he's been, even as his followers and other Kenyans join in the protest to lower the cost of living. And of course, keep interacting with us. Who bears the greatest responsibility between the police and protesters? That is the question of the day. Hashtag Morning Cafe, SMS line 22047, at Limuki_F, at Fred Indimuli, at Nyaringita _ at TV47 News. The hashtag is Morning Cafe. And of course, we will be sampling your feedback later on. Freddie?
Thank you, Flora, for that. We continue with this, and of course, kindly continue giving us your feedback. We'll try as much as possible to sample some of it before we wrap up today's edition of Morning Cafe. I'm still in studio with Daniel Orogo, governance expert, and MP for Gatundu South, Gigi Kagombe. And before the break, the Honourable Member of the National Assembly took us through some chronology of events from 40 years ago and told us how things were similar to what we are seeing now back in 1982, again in 1997, 2007, 2012, 2013, 2017, and now 2023. And what I would like to question is, yes, all those instances happened, but at the end of the day, a solution was found.
Yes.
Yes. What we are seeing right now is that there's no solution in sight. And probably just to paint a picture of what I'm talking about on the dailies this morning, page 6 and page 7 of the Daily Nation, we can actually see the dichotomy of ideas and the kind of approach that these two alliances, if I may call them that, are approaching to the situation right now. On one hand, Raila terms the protests a success. Yep, on page 7. On page 6, I am ready to talk on issues affecting Kenyans, but we will not share power, the president says. Both parties maintaining their hardline stances in as far as this issue is concerned. In all those instances that you mentioned, a solution was found somehow. At the end of the day, there was a resolution to the problem. What we are seeing right now is that there is no resolution to the issue.
You know, Fred, you're so wrong when you say that on national TV, that a solution was found.
It was found.
In 2000,
the country was able to.
So the solution that we found in 2007 is killing thousands of people?
No.
The solution that
was
after the ICC, is that what you're calling a
the
solution?
solution that we found, the solution that was there was on a National Accord and Reconciliation Act.
After killing people.
That was a problem, not the solution.
You're asking about the solution.
That was a problem.
That wasn't the problem.
The solution was the National Accord.
I have to say this. Today, yesterday, you went to the streets and you said that you were fighting for the cost of living. I want to know, first of all, if I would understand if people were protesting against the cost of the cost of living that would be implicated by the finance bill, all right? The finance bill is suspended by the courts. Why are we in the streets?
It is already an act. Even the suspension by the court is only temporary.
Suspended.
It is only temporary.
But it's suspended. Why are we in the streets?
The Catholic bishops are asking that you actually do away with the Finance Act altogether.
So there's a possibility of doing away with it?
No. It is only the Catholic bishops.
So the Catholic bishops do not know what they're saying.
Fred.
It is a question about the possibility of us getting a solution. Because I said that there was a lack of leadership.
You asked about solutions.
I want to know.
There is a trend and there is a script that is perception in the public. And that's why I said the attempt to paint the demonstration, to personalize the demonstration towards a personality, and subsequently put that as one person who would want to get to the government through backdoor. That has been a conversation that has been on public domain. And you've asked us very openly here that even in those instances, in the chronology that Mheshimiwa has given, a solution was found. Either way you want to personalize it, in 1997, you're mentioning 2002, there was a conversation. There was however much there was a disagreement. But if you now want to mention Raila get you into agreement with those government, there's a ceasefire. In 2007, let us tell you, because I don't know, you're mentioning others that you are not born yet by that time. And then 2007, you were politically conscious. Many of us were politically conscious, Mheshimiwa. 2007, there was a national reconciliation accord that led to a number of acts being implemented, a number of institutions being implemented, one of which you have demonized. You've gone in public, demonized NCIC. That was an institution that came after the National Reconciliation Accord. After that, there was another establishment for TJRC, a report that begins to look at the history. What are these factors that have been leading to violence? What is the possibilities of resolving this violence? After that, there's a number of constitutions that were made, a number of issues that were repealed, including the Krieger Commission that is investigating the issues, including the report by Waki, that I know that you're trying to push and saying that it led to ICC. Let us begin to see some of these good things that comes out of this accord. Mentioning the 2017, didn't we have a truce in 2017 when the country was almost sliding into anarchy, post-handshake? And a number of that, Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta has attributed some of his success after that handshake that gave him a peace of mind to implement activities. As to whether he was right or not, another debate. In this particular context that we are in right now, Mheshimiwa, and there's an attempt again to personalize this kind of demonstration. And I've said, I have a problem of this demonstration called anti-government. You'd agree with me, it's not anti-government. It reached a point where Mwananchi has to go to the street, backed by the Constitution, to protest. But I disagree on a protest that brings out peoples and touch down cars and burn properties. I agree on a process that are people-driven, that are citizen-centric, demanding the accountability from the government that promises to deliver certain basic commodities to the people. That is what I am here for.
Gigi Kagombe must agree that a political problem requires a political solution. Some of the issues we're facing right now, and it was the first question I asked you, and you agreed that it is a problem of leadership that we have, that the political elite, whether Kenya Kwanza or Azimio, has failed Kenyans in as far as these hardline stances they're taking that has been captured right here on page 6 and 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. Lack of a way forward. Raila Odinga terming the protests a success yesterday. The president on the other side saying, we are going nowhere. We will not talk. We will not do anything. Now, the issue here, and you must agree, that at some point the country needs to move forward. It is a call by the media today. It is a call by the Catholic bishops. It is a call by so many other people who wish well for this country. The fact that we need to move forward. But for us to move forward, we need leadership. We already have leaders who were elected only a few months ago. These leaders appear not to be giving a solution. And I'm not saying Kenya Kwanza's side alone. Even the Azimio team are failing because they're all leaders. Don't you agree that that is where the problem is? That leaders have failed Kenyans in as far as the hardline stances that they are taking, both sides.
Before I answer your question, I want to correct Daniel. In 2017, the protests were not about cost of living. Protests were about a stolen election.
True.
There was no mention of cost of living. When we went, or when we saw Raila Odinga and Miguna go to Uhuru Park to swear themselves in, there was no mention of cost of living. This 2023, Raila Odinga is on record being interviewed by one Francis Gashuri in studio, and painting a very clear image of why the cost of living is high. Last year, this last financial year, he painted a very good picture of why the cost of living is high and why it cannot be attributed to the government. This year, he seems to have changed goalposts, and now the cost of living is occasioned by the sitting government. Be that as it may, I would like to know from you, from Raila Odinga, and I swear to you, this information will be the president at the earliest. It will not even be 1 hour after I leave here before he gets it. If you think you have a solution for the current situation, well drawn, I'll present it.
Are you saying there's no solution in sight?
I'm asking you, no, wait.
From the leadership that was elected by
Let me finish. If you think there is a better solution than he has provided.
Are you saying there's a solution yet?
There is a solution.
What is the solution?
Raila Odinga just gets off the way.
I mean,
and lets the country go forward. That is the solution.
Fred, that's very absurd. Very, very, very absurd. And this is the problem. This is the problem, Gigi. I am requesting us to desist from personalizing the current challenges that we have. And I've agreed with you, Fred. Looking at providing for the account that is provided in the dailies today, with the two political parties are taking hard stands to attribute either countering demonstration or proceeding with demonstration as a win in the background of life lost and property destroyed, and in the background of an evidence of an excessive use of force by the police, and in an evidence of unruly protesters who've destroyed the property. We cannot bear and say that one particular single person is responsible for the problems we have. They are part and parcel of the problem. And like you asked, do we have a solution? Mheshimiwa, we were on a conversation with one Senator A.C. Kinyuri that sits on the bipartisan talk in one platform. And I questioned, why did the talks fail? She provided a chronology on why the talks failed. And I desist from that. I don't want to mention because I desist from the view that one particular political functions were derailing the talk. Fred, I have been against that because the talk is a bipartisan. One particular political party cannot just stamp and attribute that the other one is failing on the bipartisan talk. Why would there be a solution on bipartisan talk? What is the failure of the bipartisan talk? Because some quarters, some factions, whether Azimio or Kenya Kwanza, believes that a bipartisan talk, someone should be calling shots from the other end and demanding what should be out of the talks. The talks were very clear. Can you have a political solution to a political problem that we have? We have been through this path. And this is why I keep on saying, if we had a national dialogue in 2007, 2008, the framers of the national dialogue and accord knew that a country had got laws and regulations, right? Those who were there that instituted the handshake, they knew that even in the composition of this handshake, the country has a constitution. But we have a political problem in the background of a constitution of the land, right? So in other essence, and I've seen this, you are asking us for solutions. One of the solutions that I would like to tell you is, please tell the Honorable His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, that there needs to be a resumption of bipartisan talk out of honesty. Because that is the problem. Because the call is, can we go back to dialogue on matters that are affecting this country? It's a political problem. Indimuli, you've asked, what is the solution? So the solution is that we have a political problem, but we are gagging each other from all the coalitions because of a constitutionalism.
Do we have a political problem or do we have an economic problem?
Now, that is what
we seem
it's
to
cost
be,
of living. Excuse me.
Listen,
wait a minute.
We seem to be suffering from
Daniel,
both.
you're asking,
Daniel,
you
I'm
ask
asking.
a question.
Daniel, wait a minute.
Probably it was a rhetorical
Do we
question.
have, is cost of living a political problem or is it an economic problem?
It is partly political because all these things, you were part of the process to actually pass the proposals contained in this. You were part of the team also that collected some of the views from Kenyans.
Yes.
Yes?
But why I'm saying that is because if we're to be honest with ourselves, the finance bill has not taken effect. Absolutely not. So if you have a problem, if you're saying that the politics of it, the bit that is political is the making of the Finance Act, right? Mm-hmm. The act has not taken effect.
Yet the president signed it into law.
But it has not taken effect.
No, but it was signed?
It has not taken effect.
Enacted.
Listen, wait a minute.
Yes.
Your salary will not be drawn. All those things that people are complaining about has not been drawn. Mm-hmm. It has not been effected. But do we have an economic problem? Yes. So this is not a political problem.
It is.
And that, let me tell you, let me finish. You know, because of course, and I told you, you take a position, I take the opposite, and I'll be right. Because you see,
why can I also be right? Because
if you realize, Daniel, I've been quiet when you're speaking.
Yes.
Please accord me some respect and courtesy.
Okay, go ahead.
All right? Then we can have the conversation.
No problem. Go ahead.
It's a dialogue.
Yes.
We take turns, so we don't talk at each other. So what I'm saying is, the problem we have is economic. And an economic problem cannot be solved politically.
Then what is the role of politics?
What we're saying is that we must be sober as we sit down even in Parliament and draw changes that are going to improve our economy. I went to school and studied economics, and someone else went and studied political science. Those are two different disciplines. So what we're saying is, when we have a cost of living, you know, the problem we have in this country is that we do not have, unemployment is very high, right? Why is unemployment high? Because we have taken all our jobs to other countries. It is that simple. As we sit at this table, just check, tell me what has been manufactured in this country at this table. Nothing, absolutely nothing, including this paper that you're reading, has been imported, including the clothes you're wearing. Everything at this studio is imported. And that is the case in your house. The bed you sleep in, the mattress you sleep on, the duvet you cover yourself in, everything is foreign. How then do we create employment? That's why we were saying we need to start having solutions that are actually economic. Because the biggest problem we have here is not even the high cost of living. Even if fuel was at 10 shillings and you do not have the 10 shillings, then it's still high, all right? The cost of living is still high. So what we're saying is that people have no incomes. And the incomes are not commensurate to the lives that they would want to lead.
I hear you and I understand you, but then you raise a very important point, and you say it is an economic problem.
Yes.
Yet there's a role that politics plays in actually formulating policies towards ensuring that this economy is sustainable.
And that is
the issue.
And that is what we did, and then it was demonized now politically.
So what is the problem?
Because what you're saying...
Yet you cannot separate the two.
So what is the problem?
What you're saying is, we have an economic problem. And it doesn't matter how many times we go to the streets. By the way, we can go to the streets from Monday to Monday. We will not fix an economic problem in that way.
Let me say this.
Fred.
Because we understand our democracy, and no one is lost on the fact that we do not expect that we will all be in agreement on everything every single time. Yes, and what we're seeing right now is that, yes, politicians are not intended, for all intents and purposes, to be in agreement with everything at the same time. It's even actually laughable, the fact that even one single party can have all their members thinking in one same way. People are different.
Yes.
The people of Gatundu South who elected you, they elected a brilliant young man from Gatundu South who is able to think independently. The same way, even the neighboring Gatundu North has a different member of parliament who thinks totally independently. The fact of the matter is the two of you cannot even agree on everything. That is a point of dialogue. That is a reason that we have dialogue. Yet we seem to be in a position where our political leaders say that we are not going to talk. We are not going to be able to come together at the table to discuss anything at this time. Point in question, you talked about the failed bipartisan talks. Now that one, we can choose to blame anyone, but each party should take blame equally.
You know, Fred,
the fact that you are not able to sit around a table and come up with something.
Fred, you were here in 2017. You were here. We were all here.
Sure.
Nothing much has changed in terms of our capacity to understand things. And when we saw the violence that came and the handshake that came as a result, we all know what happened to this economy. We all know what the framers of our constitution had thought about putting the government in check. And we said that we need to put the government in check, right? But when we got a handshake that after the violence, then there was a handshake, and now Raila Odinga came to the government through the back door, then that is when we started, that's why the rain started beating us. And I want to say this. If Raila Odinga thinks that he can topple a sitting government by man, let me finish.
We're back to the same conversation.
Let me finish. If he thinks that he can topple a sitting government by maandamano, someone needs to wake him up at a kojoa kwa kitanda.
Well, Gigi Kagombe, allow me to move on from that. Allow me, out of respect, allow me to move on from that. Because now it appears
Because
that the politicians are not going to give us a solution.
Yes.
And the fact that the bipartisan talks failed.
Yes.
There seems to be an insistence that any discussion is only meant to result in a handshake. Surely, there must be other possible solutions apart from a handshake.
I'll tell you why that is
the assumption. And that is the hurdles that are being brought in the halting of bipartisan talk. We have a bipartisan talk where the two parties are suspiciously about one another. You know, any other proposals that are brought that could be of assistance to this country, like you mentioned, all the other one is just jittery about similar proposals. And this is why I was telling, trying to expand my point as to why we have a political problems in this country. And rightfully you've captured, even as you asked us in the beginning of the conversation, everything settled, the buck stops with the leadership. The leadership of this country, and as to how our constitution is framed, unfortunately or fortunately, we usher in our leaders based on a democratic process and an election. There is a baggage of democracy, not only in Kenya, but even in the established democracy. The struggle as to whether the majority are always right in that decision. That's another conversation at a very higher level as to why we should review our democracy to have a better leaders or not. But we have a democracy and we have leaders who are elected. And by the way, when we elect people in different positions, and I was challenging Gigi the last time we were in a conversation, and you've mentioned it, and I agree, and I'm very happy you've mentioned it, is a young, brilliant member of parliament who sits in the House, and many of them that probably we as young leaders or citizens are looking up to. That, for example, would they feel the effects, for example, of finance bill? Would they feel and have an alternative view, an objective view about the current state of the country, and probably be a third force that could have an alternative? Right? It is our expectation and aspirations. What would have happened if there are certain members of parliament who refused to be drawn on different political extremes and sits at the parliament and say, guys, we have a country, like the editors have said in the Day Today, that we have to save this country. What if we have them that they, in fact, would join the religious leaders, would join the media association, would join these professionals to demand for a truce and accountability? What if we have this kind of leaders in parliament that would not draw extreme measures in passage of a finance bill? This country could have been saved. We could have a conversation right now. And this is where I probably see Gigi should be and should whip the other members of parliament in, instead of us having extreme political views. Secondly, as I conclude on this issue, you see, I still go back to the need of a dialogue and conversation. And in this dialogue, and Gigi is saying that we don't have political problems, we have an economic problems. You see, a section and a number and thousands of Kenyans participated on a public participation, brought their views to a memorandum and submitted to the select committee. And there is reports that shows that majority of the citizens were not in agreement of the provisions of the finance bill. The executive passed by a members of parliament where there is probably majority. And by the way, the last time I questioned this majority thing, where one of the members of parliament have said that majority was resumed by government using other means to buy the opposition members of parliament. It's on record. We are not, Fred, we are not just saying things. It's on record that Silvanus Osoro accounted on how the government used other means to buy section of members of parliament to pass a finance bill where a majority of the citizens had rejected, proceeded to the executive and was signed. I am just saying,
Fred, you cannot
these
allow
are the
that.
procedures.
You cannot allow that.
These are the procedures
Fred, you cannot allow
that are political,
Daniel,
that has interfered
Daniel, you can't do that.
with the economic crisis that we have, and hence the court has suspended that in their judgment, noticing that was in breach of the constitution because members of parliament did not do their work. Leaders didn't do their work.
And those are the challenges that parliament is facing in their process. But Gigi, even as you respond to him, of course, the president yesterday speaking in Kericho indicated that he's ready to talk. He has said this severally. But there's an indication of a willingness to talk without the extra rider that we will not do this, we will not do the other. Yet we're not seeing any movement. Yes? They say, yes, we can talk, but not handshake. The Catholic bishops have spoken. They've not called for a handshake. The media has spoken. There's no mention of handshake anywhere. Why the insistence on this discussion about a possible handshake? No one else. Kenyans are not talking about the handshake. Kenyans are looking for a way forward. Is there any other solution? Without going back to threats of whether or not we should get involved in a handshake, no one has mentioned the handshake apart from the politicians. Is there any other possible solution? For example,
To what?
what was the hope
Solution to
of the
what?
bipartisan talks
A solution to what?
to the current standoff that we are facing, whether on the finance bill or any, the Finance Act or any other issue?
We have a solution to it.
Go ahead.
Raila, stand down.
That's the simple solution.
That's the solution.
No other solution.
No other solution.
Okay.
Stand down.
From
Why do
where?
you keep asking? Let me ask you, Fred Indemuli.
He's a Kenyan like any other person.
It's okay. So, but we're saying if he stands down, there will be peace. Every day, there was Manamano on Wednesday. He called for it. He stood down on Thursday, there was peace. There was peace on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. He called for Mandamano again, there was chaos. So if the man decides today, don't go to Mandamano, we will fix this, then things will be, every time Raila decides that there will be peace in this country, there will be peace. If Raila Odinga, one person, and that is we must be honest.
And that's the only solution we have.
I'm saying, listen to me, and please listen to me carefully. After elections, August, September, October, all the way to the day that Raila Odinga says, let's go to the streets, there was calm. All right? And therefore, you can see every day, even tomorrow, on Monday, there will be peace. Because Raila has not called for demonstration, even on Saturday. All right? So we're saying, please, Raila Odinga, why are you afraid of addressing Raila Odinga and telling him to look for an amicable solution instead of going to the streets? Why is it that Raila Odinga is a demigod who cannot be addressed by the media, who cannot be addressed by the
Let's be fair to the media. I mentioned
Wait a minute, let
what
me finish.
Raila said on
give
page
me-
7
give
of
me
the Daily
time.
Nation and
Give
what
me
Ruto
time,
said
Fred.
on page 6.
Let me allow me. You call me here so that we have a conversation.
Yes, but you're being unfair
If you
because
ask
I
a question
mentioned
and you want to
Raila.
answer it, then there was no point of calling me here.
You cannot accuse me falsely as well. I said on one side, Raila terms the protests a success. On the other side, the president says something else.
I am saying this. Why are we afraid of calling out Raila Odinga?
We have.
If Raila Odinga did not call for the Mandamano yesterday, I promise you, children would have been in school. True or false? Children would have been in school like they were on Tuesday. But when he called for Mandamano, there was no school, there was no businesses. People lost lives. So we are saying, why is it so difficult to call this man, one single man, Raila Odinga? Why can't we, all of us, the politicians, the religious leaders, the media, everybody, why can't we call Raila Odinga and tell him to stand down? Because when he has stood down, then we can have a conversation. Why is it so difficult? Why is this man so on top there? Why is it that he cannot be addressed?
So you're saying
That is my
the
question.
problem starts and ends with
the
Raila
problem
Odinga.
starts with one man, Raila Odinga. When he has not called for Mandamano, there is no Mandamano.
Okay.
There is peace in this country every day. When he decides there will be peace, there is peace. When he decides there is no peace, there is no peace. So why can't we call this man and tell him, please decide to have peace in Kenya every day, and then there will be peace?
Okay.
Fred.
And then number two,
Fred.
you see, I believe in the Constitution. And you know there's the law as is and the law as ought to be. If the law, and I agree with you, probably the law ought to be that we have discussions, that we have sitting downs and everything. But we have a constitution that we passed, that we use. The constitution is very clear. It gives you what you can do and what you cannot do. And the constitution says that elections of a president will be done a certain way, and we're done. And if you have a problem with it, it provides a legal solution all the way to the Supreme Court, which we exercise. The constitution as is now does not provide a situation where the opposition leader and the person who is elected by that constitution should sit down and get a solution. The constitution as is says that the leader who's been given the mantle by the previous president does what a president is supposed to do, or what an executive is supposed to do, what Ruto is doing. And if you want us to change, you can come and say, let's have a referendum that says that after elections, people will sit down and agree on
Are you
how to
therefore saying
proceed.
the bipartisan process was a process in futility, that it was useless, and no one should have actually?
First of all, let me tell you why there was no bipartisan talks in the beginning. The day the Kenya Kwanza team was announced in Parliament, in State House, That same day, the people you've mentioned, like Akina Okenyuri, Raila Odinga had a press briefing and said that some members of that team that has been mentioned are his members, and therefore he started challenging the process. And I said, if you have a problem with Dedan Kenan and you have a problem with Mwengi Mutuse, because they should be your people, then you should be happy, because in that team you'll have 9 people as opposed to 7, and the other team will have 5. So your agenda will be easier to be passed because you have more people canvassing for your side. Number 2, less than a week into the bipartisan talks, Raila Odinga made another press conference and said that he has no faith in that team that is parliamentary and therefore must encompass some people outside parliament. You remember that? Then we said, okay, you do not have faith in the team that you brought forward, and you do not think that people of high stature like Wakili Otiende Amolo can canvass your position because you have a position that you want canvassed within the bipartisan talks. After that, when the bipartisan talks began, you remember the chairman that was elected again said they had a problem with the way the Kenya Kwanza team was conducting itself. So you realize, and we must learn to be honest. Everybody can see that the lack of willingness for this bipartisan talk is coming from one side, the Azimio side. And the person even influencing it, and these are things that we can refer to in the news briefs.
No, I'll come back to you.
Again, my stand on it, you were very aware when I also made a similar stand. We don't have the benefit. And I said this, we don't have the benefit. What we can only, the benefit of listening to exactly what happens in the bipartisan talk. What, Fred, we can only have the benefit of is reading the reports of the failures, of why the bipartisan talk failed. Gigi and I are probably, also watching what the bipartisan talk are going on, and you and media are watching. But we do not know the intrigues unless, Fred, one day you have the benefit of calling the representative of bipartisan talk, and for us to watch them and listen to them, what was really happening, and you hold them to account. But as per now, if we can't be tempted to say that one particular, and I say this, I can't blame whether it's Azimio or whether it's Kenya Kwanza. They have to tell us openly, accountably, who failed the bipartisan talk. You've mentioned an issue. We all think that we are sticklers of the law, to the Constitution, the parameters of the law as it is or ought to have been. But one of the things that always happens is that we and the framers of the Constitution probably did not have envisioned how then do we deal with contextual extreme political problems in the background of a strict rule of law. Okay? And this is where we are. And that is why I am saying, by the fact that we are attempting to personalize, my friend Gigi is insisting Raila as a problem. What if tomorrow he is out of politics and then there is a similar opposition leader who even take extreme positions? Would we be personalizing these opposition leaders as the source of problems, or is our system the source of problems? Right? There has been an attempt. Mheshimiwa, His Excellency, William Ruto, made proposals. Is it time for us to have a conversation where we can have the leader of opposition to sit in the parliament? For example, something that was extremely, something that Azimio found so extreme.
It's not even in the law.
It was not even in the law. Was he stupid to propose that? He proposed as the head of state. Do you say that he didn't follow the law? That was a proposal
listen to me.
Right.
He proposed that we change the law.
That's what I'm saying. That is
why I'm saying.
That is the change.
Listen to me, Daniel, because listen to me, Daniel. What I'm saying is,
I'll give you a chance. Just a moment.
You asked me to give you a chance.
We'll come to you, Gigi, and I'll give you your time. I'll give you enough time.
Yes.
Allow him.
Secondly, as whether it's a proposal, it was proposed by the head of state to change the provisions of the Constitution, to change the law to accommodate, the opposition leader, officially recognized opposition leader. Why did he mention that? He knew. He knew the dangers of an opposition with over 6 million followers. The winner takes it all. And then he's outside there.
Because
in case.
the possibility of a solution, because we are maintaining that we are looking for a solution.
Yes.
And probably the possibility of a solution could come from outside the current framework, the current legal framework that we have.
Yes.
Because even the president has made proposals, and you do agree he has. That's the role of Parliament, that Parliament is able to adjust, to make new laws, to even review laws, make amendments, all seeking to resolve some of the problems that the country faces. Now we are seeing a situation where this Parliament, however constituted it is unable to do that. Gigi.
First of all, Daniel is an
And
apologist.
you cut me short, by the way.
I'll allow you. We'll come back to you.
This is a conversation we've had.
Yeah.
And please, don't be an apologist of Raila Odinga. Because, Fred, you've just said here, when you said that we have a problem with the leadership, you read two headlines. One, saying what Raila said.
I'm glad you've acknowledged that now.
Yes, I'm coming to that. So we are not personalizing Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga is actually the problem. You cannot say that when we're saying it's Raila Odinga, then you say we are personalizing, but you want a solution to come from one man called President Dr. Ruto, and you say that you're not personalizing. We must be honest. The problem is a few people, is a man, is one person, is Raila Odinga. And we're not personalizing it. It is the truth. And I've demonstrated to you why it is the truth. Because nothing has changed. No cost of living has gone down because we have been in the streets. Nothing has really changed, absolutely. And if he decides not to call for Manamano, there will be no Manamano. But now, the second thing, when the president came and said, maybe, and we acknowledge there's a problem. Personally, I am a proponent of changing the law to acknowledge and to let the president, and I've gone on record many times saying that we probably need to have a proper law that allows the leader of the opposition to be anchored in law such that, even he can issue statements and he has teeth that can bite. He must have recourse, other than just having parliament and minority side and the majority side. Because at times, when we have the majority side and the minority side just to make a decision in parliament, then things might continue going a certain way. So we need to change the law and allow opposition to be entrenched in the constitution. I'm a proponent of that. And I, by the way, I acknowledge there's a problem. I even started by saying that I acknowledge there's a financial crisis. We have a problem. That is a fact. Only a fool will deny that. We have a problem. But what solution do we get? The solution will not be to the street. So the president proposed that and even brought it to parliament as a bill to change both. There are many things that we said we have a problem. Let's not be blind to it. We even said we have a problem of achieving the 2,000 gender in parliament. Mm-hmm. He brought a rule to it. He brought a bill proposing that maybe we nominate more people so that we achieve that, so that we are in conformity with the law as it is. He said we have a problem with this opposition thing. Maybe we need to bring a bill to bring opposition into the law and all those things. So what I'm saying is, maybe it is time for opposition to bring a bill so that we consider it, saying that things as are after elections, we do not, if this representative of this minority, and I'm agreeing with you that maybe democracy is probably the worst form of governance. Maybe we should have a place where people talk. Mm-hmm. But right now, as it is, if we were to talk, why the bipartisan talks are failing is because they're not entrenched in law. You cannot pick a certain standing order or a certain part of the constitution and say that this team has been unable to fulfill ABCD. So it is just floating somewhere. It is at the whims of the people in it, or the whims of the people who have appointed the people to sit in the team. You see, right now, there are some things that you cannot stop me from doing, whether you're the president or you're the opposition leader as a member of parliament, because I have a law that allows me to go and debate and put my contributions in parliament in a certain way. Maybe we should entrench that in the law so that we say when we have done elections and done with them, and people are dissatisfied, then other than the courts, we have another mechanism that we can now sit and deal with. Because when we say that the only solution will be that we can now form a bipartisan talk here and there, and Fred, you cannot even hold these people to account whether they go to that team and talk and not talk. You can't hold them to account because that team is neither here nor there. It's floating in law.
But probably that's where Parliament comes in, because you can adjust. You have a lot of leeway to do a lot of things.
And this Parliament is composed of all of us, including those who are calling for Mandamano.
And that's
all right?
That's how we started.
And you see, like you said, we have brilliant people in that parliament. And I'm sure this brilliance is not only on the Kenya Kwanza side. There's also brilliance from the other side. Not unless you're saying that there's lack of it. If there is, then someone should come with a bill, because you see, if it should be that the shoe pinches more on the other side. That's why the problem on the streets. Instead of going to the streets, come to parliament. Try to beckon the rest of us in parliament, because you're colleagues. Tell us, I think this is where the problem is. I have not had anybody challenge even that finance bill in the... By the way, and I keep saying it, and I've said it even the last time we were with you, the only person in this country who has the authority...
It was not challenged even in
Let
parliament.
me tell you, the only person who has the moral authority to speak about the Finance Act is only Antonio Loach. He's the only person who stood in parliament and said, these estimates that we're passing are going to be difficult.
The leader of minority did not mention.
Only Antonio Loach, the member for Madare. It is only Antonio Loach who has the... And I respect that man, because he stood and did what was supposed. If they had done that, all of them, the minority side, maybe we would have sat and said, maybe there's a story here, and they would have probably...
I want to get it right, that the leader of minority in parliament never stood up in parliament and expressed opposition to the finance bill.
I swear to you, and I put it to you this way. This is how first of all, the day before we do the estimates, so that we say this is when we made the 3.7T budget, we started with the estimates to say that we want to give this money to education, want to give this money to the so-and-so, all that way, right? Nobody except Anthony, and Anthony Oloch sat in that parliament until we closed. The rest of the members walked out, including the leader of minority. They did not challenge it. They did not give any contributions. They did not come. Even the following day now when we're doing the estimates, well, after the estimates, the following day, they did not challenge it. So this brilliance that you're saying, you see, I cannot be in parliament sitting on both sides. We cannot decide that we are now going to be as Kenya Kwanza, that some members of us will go. This is not a school. This is not the debate that we used to do in school that were mock. That you say that I hold this position, but I can also debate for the other side. Let me finish. Yes. This is serious business. And you expect people who are elected and hold a certain stand.
So you do agree, members of parliament have failed Kenyans?
Completely. Good. And especially members of parliament from the Azimio side.
No, of course,
I'm telling you, let's be honest. Fred, we must, when someone speaks the truth, the only thing you can do if you are right-thinking member of this society is to acknowledge it.
But how do we know your truth is truth?
No. I'm saying you don't need to know. What I'm saying is, let me finish. That if the opposition had, I cannot be a member of the opposition and also be a member of the government side. I cannot now say, now that these members have walked out, let's go and debate on the other side.
You cannot be on the minority and majority side.
You can't.
It happens a lot in parliament.
You can't be.
But anyway.
You must pick a position.
That's what I'm saying.
Pick a position.
If you look at the Jubilee members of parliament.
Are you saying from
Let's allow him to respond.
Are you saying that we would have moved to the other side and now started debating? Now I put Ishongo on the other side and we are on this other side. I assume the role of the minority leader and we start debating.
Intrigues that happens in parliament, Fred, that's what I'm saying. We do not have the benefit, unfortunately, as a citizenry of the Republic of Kenya, to know the deeper intrigues that happens in these committees in parliament.
Every day.
Section of it is streamed, majority is not streamed. We have the benefit of what we see.
No.
So that's what I'm saying. We cannot. I am speaking out of a view. I see.
Parliament is streamed even before the speaker comes in.
The intrigues that happens, we probably do not have the benefit. And I agree. This is coming back to what I said before. That in instances where we are seeing institutions of governance and arms of government that are failing to do their bit, probably blaming each other and horse trading, where are citizens of the Republic left to have a recourse? That's what I'm saying. And the acknowledgement, and I agree, you shot a question that he agrees with the parliament has failed. Mheshimiwa, probably this is why the citizens are having an alternative to vent. Because you're asking, why should we go to the street? People will go to the street feeling the despondency because the people they delegate power to are not expediting that power, are not giving them the output. That's what I'm saying. And you've just confirmed, members of parliament from certain political factions, and you're saying, are failing the process. We do not have a benefit because they are not here. They could as well say, the other side of Kenya Kwanza are the ones doing this, this, and this. So that's what I'm saying, that where is the recourse? You're asking us the solutions. one of the solutions that I again tell you, because you are noting them down, is that we need to have a president, an executive, and the arms of government that listens as the judiciary is listening to the people. Because there is a temptation to feel that the parliament has gone to bed with the executive, and that's true. And we are left at the mercy of the media to inform the public of what is happening. Mheshimiwa Gigi, I challenge you as a member of parliament. I still believe in you as a young, brilliant member of parliament, together with those that you are seeing are brilliant on the other side. If, for example, you embark on an initiative, Mheshimiwa, an initiative that sits at an objective level and say, guys, we are here as a people who reasons that are not taking extreme political side. I know we are Azimio, I know we are Kenya Kwanza, but where can we provide ourselves as a platform where citizens would listen and would reach to the alternative? You probably would not see this protest because people would want to talk to you. People would want to talk to that caucus. But simply because it's not there, guys are feeling that the only alternative way to listen and to them to be listened to is to go to the street, find an alternative way. So however much you still criticize, why would people go to the street if, it's because the arms of government has failed. It's because the executive is not listening.
Unfortunately.
If the President of the Republic of Kenya could have listened to the views of Kenyans, could have listened to the presentation that were made to the petitions, probably the courts could not have halted and suspended a process that is so important, for example, like a Finance Act.
And that brings me to the same thing that he has mentioned, the fact that it would appear that Parliament, as currently constituted, is subject to other forces outside itself. That decisions in Parliament are made at State House, especially for the majority side. That parliamentarians are not independent, have not been left to independently examine and think for themselves, vote by their own conscience. And that is also extending to the minority side as well, that their decisions are made from outside Parliament. Do you agree with that assertion, and do you think that that is part of the problem?
Fred, unfortunately, I will not dignify that with any response.
Really?
I won't. So the demos that we're finding here...
Okay, can you explain why you would not dignify that with a response?
The demos that we're finding, unfortunately, and like Danny has put it, would have made sense if it was spontaneous. If the people
is Parliament part of the problem?
If people went to the streets...
Gigi, is Parliament part of the problem?
If people went to the streets because they actually felt there was pain and it was spontaneous, if Raila Odinga, if Edwin Sifuna, if Babu Owino did not have to call for specific days, if those people did not have to call for
they are all parliamentarians as well.
For Mandamano, then I would believe what you're saying. But if we say that the people, you're talking of the people as if we don't know who these people are. The people is Raila Odinga.
I'm asking about the role of parliamentarians in this whole process.
The people is Raila Odinga.
I'm asking about the role of parliamentarians in this whole process. Fine, we've talked about Raila, we've talked about Ruto. The role of parliamentarians in this whole process, and you're saying you will not dignify that with a response. I'm talking about Parliament as an arm of government.
No, I cannot sit here to discuss that I have no independence of... First of all, if you called me here and you think I'm not independent, that I cannot think of myself.
You can't respond to that assertion.
You can't come here and say it, that it seems that members of Parliament are being thought for, and then you call me here. You should have called the President.
I'm asking you about that assertion.
Since he's the one who's then telling us what to do. You've just said it. You just said it, that this decision seemed to be taken in State House.
You're a journalist.
You should
I've
have
made
called
an
the
assertion
President.
to you,
Why did you
and I've
call
asked
me
you
here
the question.
to come and tell me that I have no independent mind?
I've asked you the question. Is this, what do you say about that assertion?
I have just said it.
And I'm giving you the opportunity to respond.
I have just told you the problem is that the opposition, the members of the minority side in Parliament, walked out. Parliament is a house of debate. We keep Hansard. Everything is broadcast live from the start to the end, every day. There is no conversation that you can have in Parliament without the members of public enjoined, if they want to. It is out there, there's a live link. Now, when we were supposed to have conversations about this country and challenge the finance bill, before it became an act, members of the Azimio side walked out. They stayed the protest. When the estimates were being discussed, they walked out. When the CS came to present the budget, they walked out. You remember? They walked out in all of them together. Immediately he stood after we started Parliament, they just walked out. So what you're saying is, Parliament was not, the way the framers of the Constitution and the way the law has been, did not envisage a situation where Parliament would be one-sided. And that is why there's supposed to be a vote, so that you know who has won and who has not. And that is why, if you look at the numbers that the Azimio side had during any of the of the voting that we did during division, you realize that they were not in Parliament. So, if you know, it's very easy to say, I like the convenience that you pick. When it is Azimio side that works for Parliament, then Parliament as a whole has a problem.
Of course, it's Parliament.
When
they are part of Parliament.
They are members of Parliament,
which is fine. Which is fine. And I agree with you. I will take that route. If it's a very easy route to take, I'll take it. I will not challenge it. So Parliament has a problem. We have a huge problem in Parliament. We have a huge Parliament. It does not work. It does nothing. It only works to oppress the citizenry and nothing else it does. It just goes and makes bills that do not make sense, and Parliament is just bad. It should be disbanded. Is that what you're saying?
We are saying,
we could go that route, and it is fine. We could go that route and say, okay, Parliament has failed, so let's do mandamano. In fact, let's go and make another meeting at Kamukunji, and we'll get a solution there. Let's be making laws from Kamukunji, because Parliament is not working.
My final word is that we have to save a country, as being, the joint editors have put it. But how then do we save a country? Is acknowledging that we have a political problem that requires a political solution. That we as a country needs to push the leaders to deal with the political process, but as a citizenry needs also to have an all-inclusive conversation on matters that are affecting this country. Fred, because we are back into this thing because we left these talks to two political functions. What if we broaden the conversation to include even members who are interested, the religious leaders, the Law Society of Kenya, and other interested parties that are interested, so to make this conversation an inclusive, an objective, and people-oriented that have a solution to this country. As I conclude, I think for us, while we, and I would look at cameras and say, while we would want to express our freedom by protest, demonstration, picketing, citizens of this republic has a responsibility also. That your freedom has a responsibility. Where yours stops, mine starts. So let us go out there and exercise, some restraint, even as we exercise our democratic right.
Thank you, Daniel. And final thoughts?
My final thoughts would be an appeal to the opposition leader, Raila Odinga. Please, Mr. Raila Odinga, we have a country, we have a generation to take care of, we have children, and we have an economy to get out of the woods. Please, let this country be peaceful, because it is within your hands to grant peace to this country. And please, let this generation of young people, of young men, forge the way forward for themselves. We have been here for some time. We know the chaos that have happened and the people who have suffered. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. I look at the families that are suffering here, and I would not wish it on anybody. But the problems that we have are not political, they're economic. And we must get an economic solution to it. And disrupting the economy only exacerbates a bad situation. Okay. So I really plead to Mr. Raila Odinga, please allow this country. We know we have problems, but we used to fend for ourselves for the last few months before there was chaos. Families were fed. Now, families are going hungry. Children were going to school. Now, children are not going to school. Businesses are operating. Now, businesses are not operating. Please, we do not want to find the way of Rwanda. We do not want to go the way of Sudan. We do not want to go the way of Somali. And I do not want to equate Raila Odinga to Felix and Kabuga. I do not want to equate him.
Don't go there. Don't go there. Don't go there.
I don't want to.
Thank you very much.
We are not yet there. So we are saying we do not want to go to that route.
Gigi
Because if we
Kagombe.
do, then it is going to be very bad.
Gigi
And you're going to
Kagombe,
repeat it.
MP Gatundu South, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Daniel Orogo, governance expert, thank you for being part of this conversation that we definitely should be having. I will be issuing an editorial commentary on the same the matters that are happening in the country later on. Let's now go to Flora Lemuki for the day's trends. Flora?
Well, what a conversation there. And before we go to the day's trends, let's look at the diary of the day. You're following up on the Azimio protest, day 2. They enter day 2, also the day and primary schools to resume today after the indefinite closure yesterday. We also do have CJ Mother Kome to launch Kiambu e-filing court. This is in a bid to help with the backlog of cases in the courts. Also, Senate Defense Committee to meet the Council of Governors concerning the Elders Nyumba Kumi initiative. Also, we follow up on tussle between police and protesters as Azimio protest enter day 2. Also, politics of handshake and power sharing. We also have Russia strikes Ukraine, Black Sea again. And finally, effects of protest and businesses. Let's now look at what are people saying on Twitter as far as our question of the day is concerned. Who bears the greatest responsibility between the police and protesters? We see Collins Joma here says, men in blue and those in disguises too. I assume the men in blue are the police. Alex Kiliswa here says, civilized police officers were supposed to give a guard of honor to the police as they go about their business, but hawa watu wetu wenye wako na 32 teeth hawajui hivyo. Someone else here, Babalaki says, it's the duty and responsibility to safeguard people and protect them as well as their property. And I am Dan here says police work is to guard and provide security for the protesters as they march with sufurias. Then someone else says, St. Peter says the protesters, they have to be peaceful while protesting. And finally, most people say here, the protesters are not demonstrating peacefully, and they stated, as they stated, is throwing stones and blocking roads peaceful. That's the feedback coming in from our viewers. Of course, keep in your feedback coming in at TV47 News, hashtag Morning Cafe. Our SMS line is 22047. Let me take it back to Freddie for the editorial comment.
Thank you, Flora. And now to our editorial comment this morning. Our attention has been drawn towards reports of use of excessive force by the police in handling protesters. This is not just about clashes on the streets. Lives have been lost, and many more hang in the balance. Is the use of force justified? And are there better ways to handle protesters? The use of live ammunition against unarmed protesters is a clear violation of their rights to life, peaceful assembly, and freedom of expression. The police have a duty to maintain law and order, but that should never come at the cost of innocent lives. In countries around the world, there are examples of effective strategies to handle protests without resorting to lethal force. Dialogue, for example, negotiating and de-escalating techniques can be employed to address the concerns of protesters while ensuring public safety. Law enforcement agencies can adopt crowd control tactics that prioritize de-escalation and protect both protesters and officers. Non-lethal methods such as tear gas, water cannon, and the rubber bullets can be used as a last resort to disperse crowds, while still minimizing the risk of serious injury or loss of life. Now, it is essential for the government and police authorities to acknowledge these incidents and initiate transparent investigations into the excessive use of force, holding accountable those responsible for these tragic outcomes, and crucial to rebuilding trust between the police and the people they serve in times of unrest. Now, the role of law enforcement is undoubtedly serious. It is time to reflect, learn, and ensure that the necessary steps are taken to prevent such tragic incidents in the future.